so we're going to start the event now. Thank you guys so much all for coming. So this event is actually one of the first events that we're holding ever for the Medicine Encompassed community. And as you can probably tell by organization and what we do, we aim to bring a more interactive and I guess a more fulfilling component for students in aspiring to go in the medical field. And as we suggested, this is the first this is the first AMA out of our medical path series, which basically highlights all of the stages towards becoming a doctor. So as you guys know, this is for the pre-medical stage, and our next AMA will be actually for dental school, and it will just kind of go from there on to medical school and so on. So we have our first guest, Gauthami, who is a student studying at the University of Pennsylvania, and Darshini, if you want to take over from there.
Yeah, sure. Actually, Gauthami, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Gauthami. As they said, I'm a freshman right now at the University of Pennsylvania here in Philadelphia. I started becoming interested in medicine like middle school and high school, and I'm currently a pre-med student here at Penn thinking about studying biochemistry. I'm in something called the Vagelos Program in the molecular life sciences, which means that I get to get a master's in chemistry before I graduate.
Nice. All right. So should we go ahead with the questions? Aliza.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, if you guys are comfortable turning your cameras on just to, I guess, foster more of that interactive component, that would be great. But of course, if you're not comfortable with that, feel free to leave them off. But you could start, I guess, like piling all your questions in the chat for her to answer, or you could unmute yourself, whatever works best for you. But we also have a list compiled with all the questions that you guys sent in, which you will also be answering.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we're going to start with a couple general college life questions. So how has your first year been so far?
It's been pretty good. It's been a little weird because everything is over Zoom. But I think the biggest part about freshman year is adjustment, because the learning style is very different in college. It's a lot more self-directed. You know, you have to do a lot on your own because class time is only a few hours per week. And a lot of it's just you figuring out where do you need to work more and focus more of your attention on. So definitely just adjusting.
And so a lot of people had specific questions about Penn, so I guess we'll start with those. What is your favorite and least favorite thing about Penn? And also along with that, why biochem at Penn specifically?
So one of the reasons I chose Penn was because of its location. So because it's a city, we have a lot of hospitals around us, and we have something called the One University System. So my dorm is right in front of the medical school here. And we have a hospital, and then we have the children's hospital. So there's a lot of opportunities for volunteering and clinical research. And I think there's a weird thing about Penn that I think I don't really like is that you have to apply to be in clubs sometimes, especially if you want to be in a committee. So that's a little strange, but other than that, it's pretty cool.
And then what first sparked your interest in medicine?
Well, both of my parents are biomedical researchers, so I kind of grew up listening to them talk about, there's experiments and things at the dinner table. And sometimes late at night, they'd have to go check on their experiments. So they would take me with them, and my mom would entertain me by letting me fill pipette tip boxes, which would pay me for each box I filled. But I think I had a really early exposure to it. But other than that, in school, just taking classes, and I joined Relay for Life, which is cancer fundraising for the American Cancer Society. Things like that really helped me hone in that I wanted to be a doctor and I wanted to interact with people and really make an impact through science.
So was it mainly the exposure that you had from both of your parents that kind of pushed you towards biochem, or what you're kind of thinking about right now, or was it something else?
I think why I chose biochemistry in particular for a major was when I took AP Bio and Chem in high school, in bio, what interested me the most was when we were talking about the different macromolecules and cellular processes at the chemical level. So for having a very fundamental understanding of biology, you need to have a very chemical understanding of it too. So biochemistry kind of is a marriage between biology and chemistry, where you're understanding biological processes from a chemical perspective. That's one of the reasons I chose biochemistry as my major.
Mm-hmm. That ties in nicely with our next question, which what kind of courses did you take in high school that relates to medicine? Those would be two of them, but anything else you have to add?
So I took all those AP science courses, and then, yeah, that's pretty much, I did a lot of the AP coursework. And then I also did a psychology course, which also was very interesting. But I think those were really the courses that prepared me for college, pre-med. Yeah.
So how much would you say what you learned in those courses back in high school are still being applied and useful in your pre-med classes?
Well, so because of the program I'm in, I'm required to take chemistry, physics, and math for both semesters of my freshman year. And I'm taking an honors chem class right now, and it builds a lot on what they think you've already learned in high school. Mm-hmm. And they go through it from the beginning for you in the introductory STEM classes, but definitely taking those AP classes, I think, prepared me for the workload a little bit better.
Yeah, of course. So as many students are probably wondering, since you go to such a prestigious school, I'm sure a lot of us want to know what exactly you did in high school, which would probably entail like your extracurriculars, some of your test scores, etc.
Yeah. So I think a weird part of my application was that even though I was applying to be a science major, I had a lot of humanities-oriented extracurriculars. I was the editor-in-chief of my school's yearbook. I've been in yearbook since my freshman year. I also wrote for the newspaper, and I was an intern at like a nonprofit organization that promoted emotional intelligence in children through creative writing. So I kind of tried to emphasize that in my application. And then, of course, I did a lot of science extracurriculars, like Science Olympiad, where I did protein modeling. I did a Technology Students Association, and I did like school STEM leagues and tutoring kids for NHS. So I had like a lot of different activities, I guess. And I think that helped me in a way, because for the SAT, I did much better on the critical reading section. So I think I got what did I get? Mm-hmm. I got around a 1540, around that range for my SAT. Yeah, I think that's it. If there's anything else you want me to clarify on, let me know.
And just going off of that, is there anything that I guess you wish you would have known or learned in high school that would have helped you as a pre-medical student right now?
I think, especially in college, it's easy to think if you're in a pre-med, right, you have to take all these courses. Everything has to be related to pre-med. But in college, you really want to explore different courses. These are 4 years where you can take basically anything you want. So apart from your pre-med courses, you really want to get a good general knowledge, like curriculum. So right now I'm taking a writing seminar in archaeological hoaxes and conspiracies. It's really out there, right? But I think having that breadth of knowledge is very important. So I think when I was going into college, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to study science and I'm going to stay in that league. But coming to college, I really tried to open my perspective and try to take different classes in a variety of different areas.
So what extracurricular activities, I know you mentioned a few, but maybe a little more in depth, or volunteering hours did you take that also corresponds with medicine?
So I didn't do any direct clinical volunteering hours because the hospital that I lived close to was very difficult to get into. But I did Relay for Life, so I did fundraising for that and helping setting up the events at my school for that. I also, as I mentioned, the nonprofit. So that's not really directly medicine related, but it was working with children and it was psychology in a way. So I did that where I was writing grant proposals to get funding for this nonprofit organization. And then I also wrote little blog posts about the benefits of creative writing for emotional intelligence in children. And then also I was a tutor for my peers. So I did a lot of tutoring for chemistry and physics and math. So I think those were really what I did as volunteering in high school.
So you've just gotten started, and I guess things are harder anyway with COVID, but is it difficult to have a social life while being pre-med, especially with rigorous academics and extracurriculars?
I think it's all about balance. Right now, all of our classes are on Zoom, so it was a little weird at first, but coming here on campus, everyone's open to making new friends, and I think you really should strive to have that balance. So, of course, your first priority is your education, but you need to have a social life with that as well. And I think the freshman year, a lot of people make the mistake of focusing on their social life and sometimes not going to class. But I think in the years, you'll learn to balance the two. It's a little hard for me to say right now because I'm just getting started, but that's what I've heard.
So are there any studying or time management techniques you've already developed, or some of them that you're carrying from high school that you're finding effective right now?
I think time management is so important here in college because our deadlines are very long term, and our exams, we have like for my chemistry course, we have 3 midterms and that's it. So it's learning to pace yourself and to creating a schedule that works for you, because not everybody studies the same way. And in high school, I did a lot of short-term studying and then not worrying about it later. But in college, everything is cumulative. So everything you learn in the course before, you're going to need to have that knowledge later on. So you want to make sure you study committing to a long-term study plan.
Maybe Sandhya, would you like to ask a few?
Yeah, sure. So, what keeps you motivated throughout this path of pre-med and medicine?
I think the idea that I could have a career where I'm definitely making an impact on people through science, and I don't know how to really answer that question, because it's really easy to lose sight of that when you're in these intro courses and nothing is directly related to what you're studying. But I just think the motivation comes from wanting to help people. And I think that's the case for most pre-meds out there.
And then kind of going back to the college applications, do you have any advice for high schoolers who are kind of feeling overwhelming with the whole college process?
I would say make use of your summers. I think for me at least, starting my Common App essay before my senior year started was definitely helpful, because your first semester senior grades do matter for college. So it helps you take the stress off if you get started a bit early, and devote a bit of time each week to working on your application so it doesn't pile up at the end.
So for you personally, what was the admission process like, and what was the amount of test prep and studying that you did?
So I applied to a bunch of schools in the early round. So I sent in 6 applications in November. So I finished all of my standardized testing by March of my junior year. I had friends who finished it this summer before junior year. So I did my Common App essay and I edited it and I finalized it in October. And I submitted so I had all my applications finished and filled out 2 weeks before the deadline. And then I had final rounds of edits and I submitted in end of November 1st. And then the rest of my schools were all regular for January 1st. So it was doing more rounds of edits, finishing the extra supplementals I had to do, and submitting those. Studying, it was just normal, like senior year. Whatever had been going in junior year, I eased up my workload just a little bit in terms of the courses I took senior year. But you don't want to go so easy on yourself because colleges do look at that. But I think at the end of the day, everything was manageable altogether.
This next question is like a two-part question. So how did you decide on what to major in before applying to UPenn, and what things did you consider when looking at what universities and colleges to apply for biomedical science?
So biochem, I think I mentioned a little bit before. I knew I wanted to do something in a science-related area. I just wasn't sure if it was going to be biology in particular or biochemistry. But in high school, I did a lot more things directly related to chemistry, and I took more courses that were strictly chemistry. So I thought that chemistry was something I was a little bit more well versed in and a little bit more interested in. So that's why I chose biochemistry as my major. And then when I was looking for universities, so I looked for schools that had a really strong biochemistry department. I looked for schools that had a lot of research going on because I knew I wanted to do research in college. And I looked for schools that had hospitals nearby so I could do volunteering and shadowing and things like that.
Okay, and then was the transition from high school to college, especially during the pandemic, a tough process? And in what ways did you handle it?
It was a little difficult to adjust to this new learning style. I wasn't used to having so many few hours of class, but then having to study outside of that for a considerable amount of time. So that definitely took a lot of adjusting to. I guess for me, helping like creating a schedule really helped because I would be like, okay, this few hours I'm going to dedicate to chemistry, this to like physics, like things like that. So creating a schedule definitely helped me adjust.
And then what were your stats in high school, and what made you different from other applicants?
So stats, do you mean like GPA and test scores?
GPA, test scores, stuff like
that. So my school calculated GPA a little. We had a weighted GPA system. So if you took an honors course, it's 0.5 more. And then if you take an AP course, it's 1 more. So my GPA was close to a 4.8. I don't know how that would translate. And my unweighted GPA was a 4. And then for my SAT, I got a 1540. Do you want me to do the breakdown of the SAT reading?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I got an 800 on the reading portion and 740 on the math. I took it once.
Okay, great. And then at Penn, are there opportunities for clinical work?
Yeah. So Penn is a research university. We have, because we have all these hospitals here, we have so much research going on. And it's really easy to find research at Penn. So that was one of the reasons that attracted me towards the school.
Okay, Darshini, do you want to pick up on some more questions?
Sure. So going back to what we were talking about with the college application process, what was your essay about?
So I wrote about how growing up with scientist parents, but having a family back in India who believed in astrology. So I talked about learning to look at different perspectives, even if we don't agree with them, and learning to reconcile different perspectives and how that shaped my view of the world.
I really like that. So again, about the college application process, what type of students are they looking for at Penn, and how did you align with that?
I think when they're at Penn, I guess they're looking for people who are really passionate about learning, passionate about what they do. And for me, that I guess I really did highlight in my application that I have two distinct interests. Like I have this interest in writing and dispersing knowledge towards people around my community and helping my community through writing, but also helping them through science. And I highlighted that in my supplementals as well. So I think that's what Penn looks for. And also because it's Ben Franklin's university, they really stress community service here. Mm-hmm. And they stress general education. So we're required, we have something called sectors and foundations of knowledge, which means we have to take classes in certain areas so that we get like a very broad education.
Mm. Okay, and then going back to kind of the pre-med related questions, again, kind of the numbers. As a pre-med student at UPenn, how are you evaluated as a student academically? So I guess kind of the grading system, how all that works, and also what kind of a GPA should a pre-med student aim for?
Okay, so grading here, it really depends on the class, but most of your intro STEM classes are graded on a curve. Majority of people will usually get around B range or A minus. And I think usually up 90 to 93 is an A minus. Then 94 to 97 is an A. Above that is A plus. And then an A minus gets weighted at 3.8 at Penn. An A is 4, of course. B plus is a 3.5. So as a pre-med student, I think you want to aim for around an A minus average, especially if you're looking for top tier medical schools. So around a 3.7 GPA. Mm-hmm. But it's always an average. You know, obviously people get in with lower GPAs and higher GPAs, but just as college applications, medical school applications are also a holistic process. They look at every part of your application past your stats.
So does the prestige of your undergraduate university affect your chances of getting into med school?
I don't think it does, actually. I think if you go to a prestigious school, I think maybe you have more resources available to you. Maybe. That's a big maybe. But I think what med schools are looking for is what do you do with what you have available to you? And most universities out there have research, have hospitals close by where you can do your shadowing and what you can take advantage of. So I don't think it matters. But.
And what has the pre-med community been like for you so far at UPenn? Because, you know, there's so many variants you hear about, super toxic competitive ones to ones that are actually like a community.
So Penn is known for being very pre-professional, meaning that most kids here plan on going to some sort of graduate school, and most are sure about that. So here we have a very high number of pre-meds. So obviously there are people who are very toxic and very like competitive and stressed already. But I think there are people like that everywhere, and it's really finding the people who are supportive and going to help you. Like I found we have group chats in my classes, and we try to help each other out with homework and like study questions. And I think it helped me to find a very supportive community here. But I think you just have to know what to look for.
Aliza, do we want to come back to you with the questions?
Yeah, of course. So I guess since you have mentioned that you're really set on medicine and it's probably one of your biggest passions, but I guess like contrasting that, have you ever had like any doubts going into the field of medicine? And if you did, how did you move past them?
There were times when I would think to myself, oh my God, the road to become a doctor is so long, right? You're 4 years of extra of medical school, then you have to do a residency and then sometimes a fellowship. But they're long years. But then I thought to myself, if you're really passionate about what you do, then those years won't seem like just school, right? You're learning about something that you're super interested in. You're practicing what you want to do later on in your life. And I think if you think about it that way, it really helps you get past the length of the program. Because you're utilizing your time very well. I don't think you'll realize how the years are going by.
And going off, I guess, the pathway to medical school as well, what class requirements for medical school are there, and how much time in your schedule do you have to take other classes?
So the specific requirements differ slightly between each school, but for the most part, it's like you need 1 year of inorganic chemistry, 1 year of organic chemistry, 1 year of biology, a semester of calculus, semester of stat, particularly biostat. You can get that class. You need 2 English courses. And how much time you have to take other classes, it really depends on what you're majoring in. So you don't have to be a science major to go to med school. But since the requirements are a lot of like science based, sometimes it's easier when you major in a science because then you can double count the pre-med requirements towards the major as well. But I know people who are like English majors, who are philosophy and politics majors, who are still planning on going to medical school. So the requirements, I think as long as you just fulfill those requirements, it doesn't matter what you're majoring in. So they're not too crazy of classes.
Have you started preparing for the MCAT yet? And if so, what are you, I guess, doing to achieve that?
So since I'm a freshman, I haven't started thinking about the MCAT yet. That's more towards junior year because the MCAT's only valid for 3 years. But a big part of preparing for the MCAT classes are taking those introductory chem and physics classes. So I've taken the chem and physics this year, and next semester I'll be taking orgo, so organic chemistry and biology. So I think I'll start thinking about the MCAT next semester, maybe semester after that.
Okay, I guess I'll ask some questions now again. So if you have an idea of what kind of doctor you would like to be, would you take some like specialized classes during med school?
So medical school, the first 2 years are in a classroom, and you're basically, to get a medical licensing, you have to write something called the USMLE. Mm-hmm. So the first part is a written examination, and you prepare for that for the first 2 years. So you're learning everything about different organ systems, and you're learning a lot of biochemistry, and that's what you're going to be tested on. But after that, you do something called rotations, and you get to try out different specialties, and you work with actual doctors. So there you get to look, if you're interested in neuroscience or neurology, right? You could work with a neurologist and shadow them and actually spend time on honing that specialty, if that's what you want to go into for your residency.
Okay, and then going back to like the advice, are there any tips that you have for high schoolers who are interested in going into medicine?
I would definitely say just try to find activities where you can explore that interest. And college is still about exploring your interest in medicine. You don't have to know going in that you're a pre-med or you're going to do medicine. It's okay to take classes in these different areas and not confine yourself to one path. Be open to change, I think, is very important. And yeah, I think that's basically what I was trying to say, is just in college, be willing to try different things for pre-med.
And then going back to like your general college life questions, I think you kind of touched on this, but I think this question's asking for a little more in depth about your experience as a first-year student in the circumstance that we're living in.
It's, especially first semester, it was really difficult to meet people because I was at home and so was the majority of other kids. And in our Zoom classes, especially the large ones, everyone would have their camera off, and it's really difficult to meet people. And I think that definitely put a little bit of a damper on my first semester. But by the end of it, I made a few friends, and then coming on campus for the spring semester, I got to meet a lot of new people. I started to go out in Philly and walk around and see the different sites here. And I think that definitely has improved my freshman experience much more. And I'm just hoping this is all going to go away by sophomore year, so that we can have much more of a normal college experience, and the incoming freshmen have a much better experience than I did.
How do you manage your time and motivate yourself?
So it's very important that I learned in college, basically, take breaks. Sometimes go out for a short walk, helps you recharge, especially if you've been staring at your screen for like 3 hours with no break. You're going to go crazy after a while. So definitely getting out of your room, going out and talking to people, and then coming back to study, I think that helps a lot.
And then, can you still balance personal life with work life? I think you kind of touched on this earlier.
I think you definitely can. It's all about time management, and that's a skill that you will develop in college inevitably. And I think it's really important that you do have both. Otherwise, you're not going to have a good college experience.
And then going back to the questions for like the path to medical school, how do you reach out to healthcare professionals outside of conferences for informational interviews?
I think just shooting them an email. And when you're in college, for Penn at least, we have something called Penn Career Services and Center for Undergraduate Research. So there are people who will direct you towards faculty members or doctors who are looking for undergraduate to mentor. And so I've been using that recently because I started looking for labs to work in. So it's a lot about just shooting them an email. If you're applying for a lab, you really want to read a few of the papers that they have published, so you know something, you'll have something to talk about when you're interviewing with them. So, and a lot of the time you might get rejected, but if you do so many emails, a few of them are bound to respond.
So I think that's all the questions that we have that we got submitted. So if anyone has any more questions, feel free to drop those in the chat or unmute yourself.
From Pauline, since you're interested in writing, have you visited the Kelly Writers House?
I have not, because I got on campus actually a little more than a week ago. So I'm still kind of adjusting to everything around me. But since spring, we have a lot of club applications are starting. So I'm planning on applying for the Daily Pennsylvanian, which is our school newspaper, and some of the few undergraduate research journals here. So that's how I'm planning on going forward with my interest in writing.
And then we have one on when did you start studying for the SAT? And I guess along with that, what was the kind of schedule you had for studying for it?
Okay. I took my SAT in March of my junior year, and I started studying for it in January. So there was a place near my house that they would do mock tests every weekend. So you're taking these practice tests, but in a timed environment, and kind of simulates the actual testing environment. And for me, that really helped, because on actual testing day, I wasn't nervous because I was so used to this. It was kind of like a routine to me. So when you're studying for your SAT, that's what I would emphasize the most. Really, really emphasize taking the practice test so you really get used to that testing environment, because the test is 4 hours long. So it's having the stamina to be able to focus for that long.
Okay. How did you find extracurricular activities and opportunities in high school?
So yearbook happened by chance. When I was in 8th grade, we were selecting classes for high school, and I had put yearbook down as one of my requests for the free block that I had. And I ended up being the only freshman in my yearbook class. So it was a little intimidating at first, because I accidentally sat down with all the editors at the table, and they're all seniors, and I was a little scared. I was a little freshman, right? But they turned out to be really mentors and big sisters to me, and they really helped me get acclimated to high school. And I learned that I really loved the yearbook, because it was writing, but it was also managing people, and you get to have a little bit of an artistic side to it. And that's how I started doing yearbook. And then my yearbook advisor took charge of the newspaper as well. So she would have me come and write little guest articles once in a while. So that's how I started getting into newspaper. And then I forgot to mention this earlier, which is really, really silly of me. But the summer before my senior year, I also spent close to a month working in a lab where I got a little bit more exposure to research. And it was a pharmacology lab, and we were doing nanoparticle drug delivery systems for cancer. And that also had like a very chemical perspective to it. And that helped me fortify my interest in biochemistry and towards medicine. And the rest of them were just clubs that we had at school. So just go to club meetings.
Nice. Do you have any tips for people who are currently in AP Bio?
Well, I'd say like make flashcards because it's a lot of memorization. I think that really helped me, like using Quizlet. Then I don't know any specific other study tips apart from like reading the textbook and making sure you really understand like the flow of information, especially when you're learning photosynthesis and cellular respiration. Those are the two topics that are a little bit heavy. So I'd really like making a flow chart helps with that too.
I took AP Bio, so I would second that. How do you make yourself stand out, especially when there are so many nonprofits out there because you were an intern at a nonprofit?
If you want to stand out, I think definitely having something like a theme to your application. So if you are really interested in pre-med, for example, right, tying parts of your application back to that interest, even if it's in an indirect way. So even though I was doing a nonprofit that wasn't directly related to medicine, right, I found a way to tie it back. And I talked about how this was like a bridge between my two different interests because we're talking about emotional intelligence, which is psychology based. And I said that kind of helped me find an interest in a way that I could look at what impact that emotion, like writing, is having on the human brain. Mm-hmm. So finding a way to tie everything that you're doing together to create a cohesive application will definitely help you stand out.
Okay, so one last thing from my end. Are there any specialties that you're interested in and perhaps why you're interested in them?
I'm not really sure if I've really found like that really one specific specialty. I do, because I've worked in like the cancer research lab and I did Relay for Life. Cancer is something that's really, something that's a lot of novelty in the field because, you know, even though it's such a widespread disease, there are a lot of questions that remain unanswered about it. And a lot of the disease or a lot of the treatments that we have for cancer today, they have so many side effects and a lot of the patients pass away from the actual treatments. So I think that's an area that really interests me right now. And when I was looking for labs, that's something that I kind of focus one of my labs around.
Mm-hmm. And then back to the classes, how difficult would you say AP Chem was? And do you have any tips for people in that class?
So AP Chemistry, I guess, well, I took it right after I had taken another chemistry class. So I guess a lot of the material was kind of fresh in my head. So, but if you are new to chemistry, I think definitely make sure you understand the fundamentals. So like things like stoichiometry or I think like basic skills, make sure you're very sound in that. And study tips, I guess, do a lot of practice problems. That helps you, especially in classes, math, chemistry, and physics. The best way to study is by doing practice problems. Because you could have a conceptual understanding, but then you can look at a problem and not know what to do. So make sure that you're practicing it so you know how to solve it by yourself without looking at the answer key.
Makes sense. What was your favorite AP class?
Oh, that's a difficult one. I really liked my AP psychology course because it was very interesting because we would watch a lot of documentaries and we'd have a lot of real life application. And that's something that was missing from a lot of my AP courses. I also liked AP Bio, but it was a little rushed, I think, at times. But yeah.
Okay, we are nearing towards the end, so